What is going on, everybody? In this video, we're providing you a state of the market and stock picks for February 16th, 2023. So that sounds like something you're interested in. Consider subscribing, as we do provide daily and weekly updates to get you prepared for the day and the week ahead in this glorious market that is very deceiving and continues to just rattle up and down. But nonetheless, here's where we're at. So the market, ever since post essentially CPI, a lot of people are debating that, hey, it's still coming down. Yes, I guess you could say we came down 0.1 or a tenth of a percent, but it's nothing compared to what is really matters. If you really look in the details, there's a lot of things that are rising just to make just to live in life, right? And something I talked about yesterday, and I went more in detail and understand that, all the things that we talk about here, plus energy on top of it, has been increasing. It is not going to be easy. And then the fact that we're getting misleading data, which leads to essentially the Fed to believe that the market can take more of a beating from essentially rate increases. And so the market is in this very hopium like state, waiting for something. And the thing is that it's the market could be waiting for this news that Powell just starts reducing rates, which we all well know, and the core showed that. And the Fed members and Powell have talked about that. And now that his disinflation is essentially been falsified, that there is no disinflation, that there is still a lot of inflation in the things that matter. Again, the reports are going to be altered to essentially feed a thesis to the general public, as you don't want the general public to get into a state of paranoia and fear. That's the last thing you want. And then essentially the masses is uncontrollable at that point. So with that being said, we are playing a very tight range. I mean, the market is staying within 4,200 and dropping down to 4,100 or whatever. We're currently seeing roughly about 4,177 to 4,077. It's roughly kind of what we're playing. So we're playing this 100-point range, and it's keeping it tight within here. As if you could see, for the past couple of days, we've just been bouncing back and forth. This core CPI, people don't want to put risk on because they're afraid of what could potentially happen, because they know that their milk and their bread and their gas and everything else is very expensive. Their rent is very expensive. Now, you have to understand that people almost went into bankruptcies, and so they took on HELOCs or mortgage home loans on their home against their equity to essentially keep them hopefully afloat till this thing passes. And I think that's why this thing is so overly hyped, because people need it to work. Because if it doesn't work, they know that they have a HELOC against their home. They know that they got essentially they've sold all of their valuables at this point. At least the excess essentially things that they bought during the pandemic, and so all these unnecessary whether that be collectibles or whatever, they sold them at this time for fractions of what they were, just to get some money back, to get some liquidity, because liquidity is drying up very quickly. And so as of right now, again, very misleading with the 500,000 jobs that are out there. And that could be a lot of different things. We can go into a lot of different things. The gig economy is completely different. Right now, I don't want to get too much more into it, but what we do need to know is that the market isn't going to move unless it gets some sort of information. And I feel like some information is going to drop very soon, because we are playing this tight range. The market doesn't want to put on any more risk till it knows for sure in the next 6 months we're good. And we are also getting out of earnings mode, and that we naturally are going to start selling off. Plus, it's options expiration week, so you have to be mindful of that as well. And so at some point here, things are going to snap, right? And there's a lot of tension between China and the U.S. There's a lot of other things, right? The natural disaster with what's going on in Ohio. Again, that's huge black swan that could make things really bad. You have to understand that these things that are going on right now could start affecting inflation, and that's going to be a big issue. If inflation starts rising, we are going to be in big trouble. We're going to start going back to 75-point basis moves, and it's not going to look pretty. Who knows where we'll stop? We're talking 6 and 7s already, which was something that they essentially ruled out months ago when we started this pump. Things are not good, right? And we can pretend this hopium push and think it's going to continue up back to all-time highs. How? Explain to me how that's going to happen. In my opinion, we can't break 4,200. Unless we can break 4,200, this hopium push is done. And the longer you sit here and continue to get rejected off the 4,200, more than likely you're going to start diving and turn around, because now you're starting to face this time. You went parabolic for several weeks now. You're just biding time before you roll over. That's pretty much what it is. I've seen it many different times. You don't sit and consolidate and continue to keep getting rejected off of levels and then break through. There isn't a strong enough catalyst, and I don't see a strong enough catalyst coming to change that. It's definitely going to need a lot of something. Otherwise, we're going to naturally turn over and start selling. Are we going to go back to new all-time low? No, probably not. Not unless we get fueled by something else, one of the black swans we talked about, or recession, or something along those lines. Right now, you're running essentially an overheated engine, and something's ready to break, and we are just a ticking time bomb waiting for that to break. So until that happens, we don't know what piece. We still are pivotal events that are really coming up. The next core, the next monetary policy. We got a month before that stuff happens. And again, if we're going to continue to float around here and get mediocre earnings because of expectations are so low that it doesn't matter, the market's just pushing because they hit expectations. It's not good. None of that's good. And then to see, and one thing to point out, we had this very historical rate increases, 75-point basis moves for several essentially monetary policies back to back to back. Now, being said, we barely decreased 0.10% of a point. Barely. And you're going to tell me that we just came off a 25-point basis move, a 50 and a 25, and then that's going to be enough? I think the market is going to start looking more at like 6. Now, they still are projecting to do 2 25-point basis moves. But if that core doesn't move again, or that core starts creeping up even further, which history has proven that inflation will spike, it will come down, and then it will spike even higher. There's a lot of things lining up. China hasn't reopened. You have that huge spill out in Ohio. There are some big events that are going on that could cause essentially a huge spike in inflation. And on top of people working 2 to 3 jobs, and just try to stay above inflation and understand that, yeah, you can work 80 hours a week, but if you can't make over inflation, right, you're there's no way you're going to get ahead. And if you have any kind of credit card debt, it's not fixed. It's not fixed rates. So the more these rates go up, the more you're going to be charged for holding that debt. So something will break. It's just being patient to wait to see what breaks. And you can feed in the hopium spike and try to take advantage of it. I'm not saying don't take advantage of it. Take advantage of it. But you really need to be very cautious on what's going on because all it's going to take is one bad event overnight, and this thing can drop 100 points and then can lead to a huge cascading effect. Nonetheless, I'll leave it there and I will continue. So again, 4,200 needs to break. Unless this thing really breaks, just play this range. Just play essentially the 140, roughly play around the 4166 to roughly the 4066, so that 100-point range. So it goes up in this range. Okay, buy down, and it hits that range, buy up until we get some event or this thing breaks with one of these levels. The market is neutral, and we'll be playing a lot of these neutral 100-point moves like this on the general index. One thing that was very interesting today is the dollar started ripping over 104 today. The bulls definitely didn't want to see that today. This could be a retest. We'll see where this ends up tomorrow. If this thing is back over 104 tomorrow, that is going to be an issue for the bulls. And the market has been kind of ignoring the dollar at this point. But again, it's only so often. Right now, it's not breaking out, so you can't assume it's going to keep going up. It's been struggling to break essentially that 40-60 mark. You can't break it. Again, it's going to keep trying. Unless it gets a catalyst, it will not break, and then it will start selling off. It will naturally roll over and sell off. Bitcoin, huge spike today. I'm not sure what news is actually backing this, but worries of inflation could be something like that. I'm not really sure what has happened there, but nonetheless, we'll have to see what happens with Bitcoin. So this thing can explode pretty much up to roughly the 30K mark. Again, we'll see what happens. Bitcoin has kind of been the hedge against inflation, but we had all the FTX drama and stuff. That stuff has kind of been under the rug at this point. So we'll see if this thing wants to continue up. Again, you can buy in and hold. Buy and hold is not a bad strategy as long as that was what your strategy is. Don't buy and hold and then be upset when you sell and then it continues to pump up. And then, 3 months later, it corrects back down to where you previously bought in. So again, it's not anything is possible. It could be going up, but in my opinion, what you want to be doing is you want to be you want conviction. You want the market to prove that that's really what's going on, right? If you don't have conviction, if you don't have evidence that that's what's going on, why are you going to feed into this thing's just going to start going up? Because things are not good. Things are very brittle and about ready to break. So nonetheless, Tesla needs to break 214 to continue up tomorrow. Again, it's holding the floor of the 182 very, very well. So we'll have to see if that does break. Apple, again, Apple's trying to break out roughly over the 156. Could potentially start spiking up. Well, we'll see. And the next level would be essentially 164. See how that does play out. NVIDIA, again, you want any kind of hopium to run, you're going to need to make sure NVIDIA falls behind. Again, it's got a pretty hard ceiling here at the 231. Needs to break above that if it can. You could probably potentially run up to 216. Again, very parabolic. This thing is just shooting straight up. That's not what you want to see. You want to see more of a move like this. This is more structured and a stronger bullish move. This is let's just skyrocket up and then absolutely tank afterwards. So you just have to be very, very careful and very cautious. Risk has to be managed at all times. As middle of the day, if you don't have stop, all of a sudden some news comes out and then the market drops 100 points. Are you prepared for that? Do you have stops in place? Are you willing to hold it for 5 to 10 years? What is your plan? That plan should have been had before you got in a position. BA needs to break above the 221 and hold above that. I think if it starts gaining some steam, it could potentially start going. Again, coming really close. You only got 2 more days for the options expiration, so just be mindful of that. Bottom, you're watching essentially the 205. You don't want to break that. That could start leading to some pretty heavy downside selling. But we will see there. Now, JPM, again, same thing. It needs to break above essentially the 144 if it can. Could potentially gain a lot of steam there. Aside from that, you don't want it breaking below the 137. They can start leading to some real downside. You get some pretty strong support here at the 132. But we'll see. We'll see because of the fact that, We punched straight through a lot of these resistances, which should be now support. But the problem is if it straight buttered through the resistance, could potentially easier butter through the what is currently now support. So GS needs to break above essentially the 386 and needs to hold roughly the 342. Again, just like the market needs to break one way or another here to really determine what's going to happen there. And then as far as earnings is concerned, there was a couple earnings. Shop had some earnings after hours. You can see the move after hours. Shop was never did totally great. Somehow it absolutely gets obliterated for earnings, and then the next day it just skyrockets up. So nonetheless, you can't go off of it. I think it's just diehard Canadian fans out there supporting Shop. It's a good product in general. It's very adaptable and very customizable. So I can see where it could be a huge advantage. But again, I think it's more of just a cult-like following for Shop, which continues to keep it up even after bad earnings. So we'll see where Shop is moving forward. But Shop did have earnings today as one of the ones I had on the map. So I want to kind of watch this tomorrow and see if this does start pushing tomorrow. If the market pushes, we'll see. As long as the market stays within that range, you'll get some pretty decent intraday moves from some individual stocks. This is why earnings is kind of good to be watching the ones that have earnings, because could potentially pump. But we'll see how that does play out. So if you made it this far, I don't want to make this too long. Again, there's not really a lot to report on until we break out or some more major news coming out. So with that being said, you can go ahead and drop a comment on what you feel is going on in the market. Drop a thumbs up, and I'll see you guys on the next one.